The Capital Confidential podcast is brought to you by the Times-Union, the leading newspaper in New York's capital region. Subscribe today or visit online at timesunion.com.
I built this little model from scratch and was able to just walk it down to the Siena Polling Institute. And a couple people there were like, oh, this is nice or whatever. And then I took it to the head guy and he was like, yeah, this looks awful.
You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
How do we beat him in an election?
We will. I'm going to run against him.
I wish you would. Dad. I would.
There are things in here that are unobjectionable because they're not that effective. So yeah, sure, I'll vote for a distinctive license plate. Sure, why not?
Jim, you had your press conference at 4 o'clock.
You're having a press conference now?
That's
You're
right.
talking?
I'm having a press conference.
Well,
now.
is this your space here or is it public?
No, it's my space.
Oh, this is your
Don't
space.
interrupt.
Okay.
This is the Capital Confidential podcast, and I'm David Lombardo. My guest today is Noah Rudnick, a senior at Ohio State. And no, we're not talking Buckeye football. We're going to be looking at some of the congressional races in New York. Noah is studying finance and data analytics there. He is also working as a polling analyst for OH Predictive Insights. He caught my attention on Twitter, I think when you retweeted something about Diane Neal. I then dove deep into your Twitter feed and came across what looks like a mini Nate Silver to me and my untrained eyes. So, Noah, thank you for spending some time with me today.
Thank you for having me, and honestly, any distraction to talk from Buckeye football this week.
Okay, all right. So you're not one of the rabid fans, or?
Oh no, we just lost. So
I apologize.
Sort of a dark cloud over campus.
I'm sorry for bringing that up. Well, let's turn right to politics then. You have a forecasting model of your own for the House. Tell me a little bit about what that is and what goes into creating a model like that.
Yeah, so the big part of it is, and there's a whole bunch of different models out there, and everyone's sort of looking at the same set of data. And so it's all about figuring out which variables matter more. Is it fundraising? Is it presidential performance? Is it gubernatorial performance? So a lot goes into just how much you tweak and how much you weight something. And so my model is a bit different from some of the others for sure. It weights presidential performance a bit less and looks a lot at congressional performance and ticket splitters. And there's a bit more variance there, but a lot of it reveals new things where it's like, oh, okay, so Trump did well in this area, but was he able to carry certain representatives across the line? Are there people like John Katko that outperform the top of the ticket and are safer? And so being able to identify that and being able to look at which campaigns do it well and which campaigns don't is a huge factor.
And how did you get into all this?
So I'm actually originally from the Albany region. So I was just tinkering around with a little third-party political model, and I took it to Don Levy at the Siena Research Institute. And so other people there were like, oh, this looks cool. You're interested in this sort of thing. And then he took a look at it and was like, yeah, this is awful, which it was. It was all weirdly weighted and not statistically relevant. And he looked at it and he was like, yeah, but listen, we can make it better. And I don't even know if he remembers me. We met maybe twice, but he really helped me. And then sort of when that fell off the radar and the election happened, I came out here to Ohio. I found myself drawn back into that political data realm and looking at what the elections mean.
Well, to be fair, though, at the time you were a high school student, right, coming up with a model?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think you should judge yourself too harshly at this point.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh, my God, but no, for sure. But it's nice to at least see that I've made some progress.
And what other fundamentals besides election results go into your model? Do you look at things like campaign fundraising? Yeah,
so fundraising's a big one. I look primarily at spending. And so I found going through back testing, at least on most levels, and it varies a bit by media market. I know most of the media markets in upstate New York are at least cheaper. But for the most part, the standard rate is that it takes about $400,000 to move the margin 1%. which is a lot of money. But there's some of these key races get $15 to $20 million by the time that it's over. And the big thing is that you really need to outspend your opponent. It's not enough to just keep spending. You gotta win the arms race against the other side.
And any other sort of objective data that you throw into your model?
Yeah, you can definitely look at demographics, and there's certain demographics that do far better, either up or down ballot. And you can see that a lot when we talk about down in Florida and in parts of New York City, but you have some Hispanic voters, especially like Cubans, which will vote very presidentially up ballot, but down ballot they'll be a lot more Republican. And so being able to identify those communities and putting outliers like that in the model is able to shine some insights on sort of what's going on. And I know in New York 19, I remember taking a look at this. New York 19, which is a battleground, has the largest Dutch population of any of the New York congressional districts, and of any congressional district in the Northeast. It's about 4.5%. And those people typically vote Democrat up ballot, but Republican more down ballot. And so being able to identify those little things that can make a district stand out is important, not only for the campaigns, but also to realize what's going on.
And what about polls? Do you take into account polling data?
Not in the model, just because nobody's paying me for it. So it's more, I'm putting it out there as more of a beta test to see how well the fundamentals do.
Okay.
There's definitely stuff with polling that changes the race, and it definitely has some conflicts between what I can see from the fundamentals and what's out there. And I definitely hope to add polling to it.
And at this point, what are you looking at, with less than 2 weeks to go, as a potential balance for the House in the next 2 years?
Yeah, so I'm fairly confident. I'm about at like 85%, which is about where everyone else is, that Democrats take the House. There's a lot of toss-up seats in these more like either gerrymandered or just tougher districts, where Democrats have been able to outspend by 2 or 3 million and give them an edge. Republicans just have to sweep a lot more of the close races. And when your party's in the White House, it's a lot tougher.
At what point do you sort of negate the impact of spending, though? I guess, there's a pretty common conventional wisdom that at a certain threshold, you're just spending good money after bad. And so do you discount the money after a certain point?
When you really look at spending in the House since 2012, there's only been a few races where the spending advantage was more than 4 or 5 million on one side or the other. I think there's a good case to be made, at least that I couldn't find that much of a tapering off effect. So not necessarily able to find that this sort of thing where if you spend way more, you can swamp the other person. It's more that if spending's even in a $2 million versus a $20 million race, there's no huge difference.
So turning our attention back to New York, and actually specifically to NY19, where Democrat Antonio Delgado is trying to unseat Republican John Faso, we've touched on the Dutch population, but what else is there in the fundamentals that you're looking at in this district that really pops for you?
Yeah, so the big thing that I'm seeing, that at least I believe is the most interesting, that isn't getting a ton of attention, is up ballot third parties. Governor Cuomo is still super unpopular. I think the Quinnipiac poll that came out a couple days ago has Cuomo, he's unfavorable with 58% of upstaters, but he's beating Molinaro by 23 points statewide, but still losing by 11 in upstate. And we saw that in 2014 too, where Cuomo just cratered in that area. But now there's a bunch of options. You got Larry Sharpe, Stephanie Miner. Howie Hawkins in this district got 9.2% in 2014, even though he only got less than 5% statewide. So Howie Hawkins does really well in the capital region area. And in 2014, New York 19 was Cuomo's second worst district before Collins. He only got 37.5%, which is abysmal. But the big thing was that Democratic opponent didn't outrun Cuomo. Cuomo really dragged him down. And all the Hawkins voters and the other couple others all voted Republican down ballot, and they voted for Faso. And a lot of that could have been just anti-Democrat, anti-Cuomo stuff. But this cycle, you have the same sort of thing where Cuomo's still unpopular. You have Mark Molinaro from the Dutchess County area, it's very likely that neither gubernatorial candidate either hits 50 or one gets close, and there's going to be a lot of third-party voters. And this cycle with Trump in the White House and those voters more ideologically polarized, it's not necessarily a given that 90% of Howie Hawkins or Stephanie Minor voters go to FASO. And so the real battle is that each person with their own party can get into the 40s. You really need to expand to these other ideologically diverse or just weirder attitude voters. What goes on in the mind of a Howie Hawkins voter? How can you get them to vote down ballot?
Is there not an expectation that the Howie Hawkins voter will also stick one line over and stay with Steve Greenfield or Jeff Greenfield on the Green Party line?
They definitely could. So the recent Siena poll that had FASO up 1, Dianne Neal was taking 7% of independents, which is a lot. And then she was taking a little bit more from Republicans. So you can definitely see those people going down ballot, and it could definitely play a spoiler effect. I would not be surprised if this winds up a close plurality win and Dianne Neal or Steve Greenfield or someone takes the winning margin needed.
How did the recent FEC campaign finance filings for this race affect your model? I know Delgado put up a big number, I think more than $3 million, but that's fundraising. I think you said you look at spending.
Yeah.
So how did it impact your model?
So not a ton. So Delgado spent a lot more. FASO spent about $2 million overall. Delgado spent over $4.7 million. So that's a lot, but when you look at it, outside groups have spent $4.5 million against Delgado. If those outside groups didn't come in and weren't providing air cover for FASO, I think Delgado would be able to pull a sizable lead out of it. But as long as FASO's getting backup from these outside groups, it's going to keep it as a closer race with probably an edge to FASO.
And you mean you've talked about how you focus on spending, but what can we glean, if anything, from the fundraising aspect of things? I know the guys at 538 made a big deal about the trend that we saw nationally in House races. Should people read anything into that?
It definitely reflects an enthusiasm, and a lot of times it's okay, so they're getting a lot of small donors, but it's all from Act Blue. It's from people all over the nation. But with Delgado's fundraising, most of it's coming from in-state. He's getting about, let me see here, 64% in-state.
Right. And
FASO's getting like 3/4 of it out of state. So Delgado's definitely doing well, being able to tap into enthusiasm and that's where a fundamental model comes in. It's does this show something more? And I know that they do the individual contributions. They have Delgado only has a little bit more in district, so a lot of it's out of the district contributions. So I don't know how much it necessarily tells us inside, and I know that they move it a lot. I just generally look at the bigger picture, and for the most part, money is money. If you can air ads, it doesn't really matter where the source comes from.
Turning to some of the other races in the state, one of the ones that seems to have a lot of people interested in the last few months is NY27, with Republican incumbent Chris Collins now facing what seems to be a serious challenge from Democrat Nate McMurray. I guess on the face of it, without a scandal going on in that race, I assume the fundamentals of that race say Chris Collins should be up about a bajillion points, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that same poll that had it close also asked if you could choose between a generic Republican and a generic Democrat. It had the generic Republican up 18 points, as opposed to only the 3-point gap that Collins is up by. So it's definitely a unique factor here. Scandals are definitely tough to do. It's tough to know first what exactly is a scandal, like overall. Obviously, in this case, being indicted for fraud is probably a scandal. But you can see that it's almost all that. Trump's approval still 56% in the district to 38% disapproval. So the big thing is that Collins is dragging it down.
And how, if at all, can you account for scandal in your model?
You definitely can. I look at it. It's a couple points. It's tough to do. Again, with something like this is a pretty big effect from the last election. It would be. There's not a huge sample to look at, so it's tough. I know out in California 50, there's the same sort of thing with Duncan Hunter was indicted for fraud. But the big thing was that is an indictment different than an investigation? And he was investigated last cycle for a lot, and it was a big campaign issue. And then he only underperformed fundamentals by about 2%. So it's really tough to gauge how much a scandal is going to cause or how is an indictment different than an accusation and so on and so on.
So do you have to put your finger on the scale essentially and just determine what the weight of it is?
Yeah, you definitely can. It's just going to be a bit subjective for sure. And I think that's one of the cases where at least polling is better than fundamentals when it comes to scandals, and being able to put in a New York 27 poll and being able to see what the top line is a lot better than trying to determine how you think the scandal is going to affect it.
To the west of the capital region, we have a competitive congressional race with freshman Republican Claudia Tenney and Democrat Anthony Brindisi. What do the fundamentals tell us about this race?
So I have that one as a super competitive one. That's one where I can see sort of break either way, and I know the polling there has been about a toss-up. One of the big things there was, again, these third-party voters where there's no third-party candidate in the race this cycle. But last time around, remember, Martin Babinek of the Upstate Jobs Party.
Yes.
I remember hearing about it. I know he was spending some cash, but he ended up taking 12%. So Tenney was held under 50. So he's not running again, but now the big question is there's going to be Babinek voters going out this time around. And so Tenney was under 50. So it's about how you're able to distribute that 12%. That's another one where fundamentals sort of look at it and go, well, you just took a significant chunk that's going to decide the race and sort of like and eliminated it. Third-party runs typically distribute out more to where they came from, but a lot of times are just anti-presidential party. And so you can definitely see those going Democrat. Brindisi's getting a lot of money, and Tenney's definitely made some comments. She's running a very base campaign, which makes sense for how much she underperformed Trump in the district. But in something where you're trying to appeal to people with more of an independent streak, it was definitely an odd way to position yourself.
And turning to New York City, NY11 has become an interesting race. What are your thoughts on that? Do the Democrats have a chance of pulling off an upset?
I'm skeptical of New York 11. I know there was a lot more talk before when it looked like Michael Grimm could win the primary. I honestly don't believe it'll flip. The candidates are raising some money, but it's not getting a ton of outside money attention. I don't know any polls, but I don't believe. I think the more interesting one is New York 1 with Lee Zeldin, and even that one is more of one where Republicans definitely favored in. The big things here are this is where Cuomo actually does a lot better, and while he craters in upstate and falls behind there, he does do a lot better in these regions than Obama did, and in a lot of these places. And so I can see him being a help. I know he's given some money, and there's always pressure for him to help Democrats more.
What about the neighboring Pete King district on Long Island? Does that have the same sort of fundamentals?
So yeah, he does well there. King is just such an established figure in there. And now I wonder if this will come back to bite me. But I honestly don't think he's in a competitive race at all. So a lot of times, I do look at down ballot over performance. And so when someone is consistently winning 60% of the two-party vote, at least fundamentally, it doesn't believe like there's going to be a close race here.
One of the seats that Democrats were really hoping would be competitive is in the North Country with Elise Stefanik, but at this point, it doesn't seem like it's one of the battlegrounds in New York. Why, going into that race, did Democrats think the fundamentals made it possible for an upset in that race?
Yeah, I don't believe that was ever a serious one. Stefanik is really, really good at establishing an identity that allows her to survive a wave here, and very good at just do. She just performed extremely well last time around, and I don't know if anyone was seriously making a push for her. There wasn't a lot of money spent. She won by over 30, I believe, last time around, which was a decent overperformance of polling. So I think it's just a case of, well, we have better targets in New York to go for and just better targets nationally, so we'll let her go.
You mentioned wave. We hear a lot of the expression blue wave thrown around. What does it mean to have a wave? What are people talking about when they throw terms like this around?
Yeah, so a lot of times when they talk about wave, it's typically either, so the generic ballot is a certain like D+8 or D+9 or something, but a lot of times it talks about a number of seats gained. But when you have maps that are drawn like this, it's very hard to say that a D+8 but only like 30 seat pickup and then in the Senate or whatever is not a wave, just because sentiment is so much on your side. And the big determining there is going to be maps. A lot of these maps are drawn to survive D+8, a realistic D+8 environment, and they're very well drawn. But in a certain case, you might not be able to get the tipping point until you hit D+9 or D+10, and then you just win a whole bunch of close races. And New York isn't as much like that just because of the way upstate's drawn. It's a lot more about the personality of the incumbent definitely makes a difference, and whoever the candidate is. So you can have like a Zephyr Teachout who loses by 9 or 10, but then in a better year with Delgado and more money is able to outperform that. And so I think a lot of the wave matters where it hits.
And now to put you on the spot, assuming there's nothing too crazy happening in the next 2 weeks, can I get you to predict a few New York races for me?
Yeah, go for it.
So, sounds like you're pretty confident Zeldin and King both get reelected?
Yeah, I think King by a lot more. I think Zeldin by I can see a 7 or 8 point race there.
And then let's go out to the far west. Chris Collins, is he going to be reelected?
I'm going to say yes. I think at least the one poll that even had him up showed a lot more uncertainty among Republicans, and they still want the generic ballot.
How about some likely Republican seats in the central New York Finger Lakes area? You got Republican Tom Reed, Republican John Katko. How should they be feeling?
They should probably be feeling good. I think Katko, for sure, he always does well with crossover voters, but he was the only seat where Trump did a little bit better than Romney, and he still outran Trump by a lot. So it's a lot different than a lot of these other suburbs that probably shifted.
Is Anthony Brindisi heading to Congress?
Ooh, man.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Do you need to flip a coin?
I'm going to say Tenney by 1 or 2.
Okay. And, the race that's getting the national attention, Delgado or Faso?
I'm going to say Faso, as long as, so they both have the same amount of cash on hand, as long as the Republicans stay up on air there. I think Faso can get it. Winning by 10 in an open seat was big. And then it comes down to, we'll see how well Molinaro and Cuomo are able to do in the upstate area.
So you had Republicans in all of these competitive seats, but I think you said earlier you still think Democrats have a very good chance, I think 85% chance, of taking the House. Are they able to take the House without picking up any of these New York seats?
I think so. On average, just because, probability-wise, I think the model has them losing 1 seat on average in New York. It's typically Tenney's seat. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other states with far better maps for Democrats that could see a lot fall. So places like New Jersey, where the maps could give Democrats 3 or 4 seats. And you can see them very concentrated in certain areas. Virginia, Michigan, California could see a couple. So it's very much concentrated. I think if you start picking off some of the New York ones, then you can also start picking them off in places you might not necessarily expect it, like maybe in Texas or North Carolina and around there. So there's not a ton of those suburban seats in New York that you would expect would be the first to go. But if the numbers shift a little bit and it looks like a gain of more than 35 or 40 seats, then for sure a couple more of the New York ones could go.
So if New York seats are falling, it's a tsunami effect for Democrats.
If they're able to pick up 2 seats, it's probably a good night. If they're able to pick up 3 seats, then you're talking they're either taking out Zeldin, they probably have Faso and Tenney, and then maybe one of the upstate ones. Then it's going to be a really good night for them.
All right, Noah. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time and sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And that's our show. My thanks to Noah Rudnick for joining me today. You can follow him on Twitter, where he is very active, at RudnickNoah. Next week's show will be an examination of the competitive state Senate races in New York. And you can keep up with all of the Times-Union's political coverage at timesunion.com and on Twitter at TUCapcon. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review wherever you download podcasts. And please spread the word on social media. Every positive tweet or Facebook post puts a little pep in my step. Until next time, podcast adjourned.
Just heard I tried to get you.
Ah! This day sucks!